Have you ever dreamed of being your own boss? Of turning a simple idea into a thriving business. One that not only sustains you, but maybe even creates opportunities for others. If that dream sparks something in you, well, you're definitely in the right place today. We're taking a deep dive into an incredibly practical, really step-by-step guide designed to help you do just that. Start your very own small enterprise. And this isn't some dusty academic textbook. No, this guide, it's actually titled Your Guide to Starting a Small Enterprise. And it came about partly in response to a major government initiative.
That's right. Specifically, the Philippine government's pretty ambitious 10-point agenda aimed at generating 1 million jobs a year. So it's rooted firmly in real-world application. The goal really is to, induce action, as the guide itself puts it.
Exactly. So our mission today is to pull out those essential nuggets from this guide. We want to give you a kind of shortcut to understanding the foundational steps, the surprising strengths, the crucial weaknesses, and maybe most critically, the indispensable role of you, the entrepreneur. We're aiming to equip you with the core knowledge to potentially, get your own business ideas into motion. It promises to be a light and easy read, but also highly interactive, apparently like no other guidebook. So let's unpack this together.
Yeah, and what's particularly insightful, I think, is how the source material immediately grounds these concepts. It doesn't just launch into, abstract definitions or jargon. Instead, it starts by showing you exactly what a small business often looks like on the ground. It makes the information far more relatable and, crucially, actionable for anyone thinking about this path.
That's such a powerful way to start. The guide opens with this really wonderful anecdote about a man named Orly. It just paints such a vivid picture, what small business often looks like from the grassroots up. We're talking about a guy who runs his entire ornamental plant breeding business out of a bahay kubo that's a traditional Filipino hut. He's the ultimate one-man band, really, managing the plant breeding, handling all the finances, often just in simple notebooks, apparently figuring out the marketing, overseeing all the daily stuff. It's very hands-on, very personal.
Orly's story truly encapsulates the essence, doesn't it? A small business is typically organized almost entirely around the owner-manager. They are the central figure, the linchpin. They make most of the major decisions and run the day-to-day operations with, little to no specialized staff. It's a huge contrast to larger corporations where functions are all split up and delegated. Orly, in his bahay kubo, he's the one who dreamed up the business, picked ornamental plants as his niche, decided on being a single proprietor, figured out the capital. He handles the records, sets up the breeding system, chooses suppliers, manages stock, picks the tools, decides the location, finds buyers, sets prices, even hires, and pays his 3 helpers. It's this holistic, central role that's just such a hallmark.
It's fascinating how central the owner is. But I wonder, does that intense personal involvement ever become a problem? Like a detriment? What are some of the other common characteristics of these businesses? Things that might make them different from a bigger company, the better or worse?
That's a really good question. You might think a small business is just a scaled-down big corporation, but the guide points out some really unique traits that set them apart. For instance, they're often not just businesses, but almost extensions of families, frequently set up as single proprietorships or, family-based operations.
And that's not just a legal detail, right? It must shape everything.
Exactly. It shapes the management style, employee loyalty, everything. And their product range is usually quite limited, typically focusing on, say, light consumer goods like food, drinks, clothing, not complex industrial stuff. Production is generally small volume, catering to limited markets, usually just local ones.
Okay, so very focused, very local.
Right. And they tend to rely on labor-intensive methods. They employ few people beyond family, often part-time. There's often what the guide calls a patriarchal management style, where employees are treated almost like extended family.
Interesting. Does that work?
Well, it can foster a strong sense of belonging. And surprisingly, the guide notes that labor turnover isn't always as high as you might expect. Even with potentially lower wages, people feel connected,
That makes sense.
Technology use also tends to be pretty low level, and capital assets are marginal. The money mostly comes from the owner-manager's personal savings or immediate household funds.
That paints a really clear picture. Very organic, very grassroots. But for governments, like the Philippine government this guide came from, how do they formally define something that feels so, fluid and personal? Is there a numbers standard?
Yes, the formal definition. That's a crucial distinction. And these definitions aren't just arbitrary. They're set up for very specific reasons, mainly to rationalize government help and incentives. For the Philippine government, a small enterprise is formally defined based on two main things: asset size and number of employees.
Okay, what are the numbers?
In terms of capital assets, it's between P3 million and P15 million. And for employment, it's between 10 and 99 workers.
Right.
Anything below those levels is classified as a micro enterprise, while businesses above those thresholds are a medium or large scale.
Oh, got it.
And this official categorization ties directly into the government's target of generating, 1 million jobs a year. It just underscores how vital these small businesses are seen for national job creation.
So it's a clear distinction for targeting support. And it's not just about what they are, but where they operate. Are these small businesses just stuck in one or two sectors, or are they everywhere?
Oh, they're everywhere. The guide really emphasizes the immense diversity. You find them across a huge spectrum of sectors, meeting all sorts of needs in different communities. This includes manufacturing, local food processing, garment making. They're incredibly common in services like auto repair shops or internet cafes.
Yeah.
Agribusiness is another big one, farming, fishing, and of course, trading from your local grocery store to a simple buy and sell operation. They really permeate almost every part of the economy.
That gives us a really solid understanding of what a small business is, from the individual entrepreneur like orally, right up to the government's official definitions. Clearly agile, clearly everywhere. But like anything, there are two sides to this coin, right? Let's dig into the strengths and maybe the weaknesses of these small but mighty enterprises.
Indeed. It's important to be realistic. It's definitely not all smooth sailing, but there are some real, often surprising advantages to being small.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, because the guide actually brings up that famous phrase, small is beautiful, which comes from E.F. Schumacher's book, Small is Beautiful. Economics as if people mattered. He praised small businesses for using what he called low-level or intermediate technology, not the high-tech of big firms. What does that really mean for the people working there, and maybe for how these businesses handle tough times?
Well, what Schumacher argued, and what the guide echoes, is that high technology, while efficient, can sometimes feel, dehumanizing for the worker. Makes them feel like just a cog in a giant machine. Intermediate technology, on the other hand, lets individuals think creatively at work. They can find genuine fulfillment from, the tangible results of their own labor.
So it's more engaging.
Exactly. It fosters a strong sense of belonging among employees. And here's the counterintuitive part. The guide notes that labor turnover in small businesses isn't always as high as you might think, even if wages are comparatively lower.
Really? Why?
It seems the connection employees feel to their work, and maybe to the business owner, often outweighs purely financial stuff to some extent. That's a remarkable strength, isn't it? It speaks to the human element.
That is a powerful benefit, keeping people engaged, feeling part of something, even if the pay isn't top dollar. But beyond the people side, the guide points out another key strength. There's surprising resilience, especially during economic crises.
That's a crucial point. In tough economic times like recessions or high inflation, small enterprises are often much better at making quick adjustments. They can change production, personnel, other systems faster. We saw this clearly during the oil crisis in the 70s and again during the Asian currency crisis in the 90s.
Right, I remember hearing about that.
In both cases, many large firms actually had to fold, but a significant number of small firms managed to stay afloat and survive. Their agility, slower overhead, direct decision-making, it just lets them pivot and adapt more quickly when things get rough.
And as a little bonus, the guide also mentions that small-scale enterprises are often the ones getting various incentives and support services from the government. So that's another clear plus. But okay, no business model is perfect. What are the common pitfalls? The real weaknesses that small entrepreneurs often run into?
That's vital to understand. While being small gives you agility, it also comes with definite constraints. A major challenge is often marketing. Small businesses usually operate in really competitive local markets, selling lots of similar products.
Sort of to stand out.
Very. And it often means small sales volumes and really narrow profit margins. It makes it tough to scale up or sometimes even just break even consistently. It's a constant battle for every customer.
And we talked about how the owner-manager is central to everything. That sounds like a strength, but I guess can also be a weakness.
Precisely. While the owner's direct involvement is great for vision and that personal touch, having few or no specialized managers often means they get totally bogged down in the day-to-day operations. They're so busy putting out fires, managing immediate tasks, wearing all those different hats,
Right.
that they sacrifice crucial long-term planning,
Right.
strategic development, thinking about future challenges that often gets pushed aside. They're constantly working in the business, not on the business, and that can really limit growth.
Constantly working in it, not on it. It's a great way to put it. What other kinds of management problems do small businesses typically face?
Well, beyond the lack of long-term planning, other common issues include an inadequate system for internal administration.
Okay.
This often shows up as poor or just plain inadequate record keeping, which makes it incredibly hard to track performance, spot areas for improvement, or even know if you're truly profitable.
Yeah, flying blind again.
Exactly. Recruitment and hiring can also be pretty unsystematic. Decisions might be based more on personal connections than on who's actually best for the job. And finally, decision-making can often be, well, unscientific, relying on gut feelings or stories rather than data or a proper analysis of options. These weaknesses can seriously hold a small business back from growing and competing effectively.
That really highlights the balancing act, doesn't it? The strengths give a unique edge, but those weaknesses can become critical if you don't address them. It makes you wonder, who is the person behind all this? What kind of individual actually thrives in this high-stakes, high-reward world? Which brings us right to the entrepreneur, the true heartbeat of the business.
Indeed. The guide makes it crystal clear that while we've defined the business and its traits, the absolute most important person in this whole equation is the entrepreneur.
Yeah, the guide really zeroes in on the individual. It's not just about the idea. It's about you, the person, taking that key role, controlling and administering everything. You're the one bearing most of the risks, right? Potentially losing it all, but also the one getting most of the rewards, whether that's money or recognition. It's a serious gamble.
It is. And the guide clarifies, importantly, that this isn't risk-taking like a gambler or a speculator. Entrepreneurial risk-taking is about strategically putting resources together, money, effort, time, to achieve specific business goals. It involves investing these resources into something new where the result is inherently uncertain. You might win, you might lose, get rich, go bankrupt, but you take those calculated chances anyway, driven by a vision and a goal.
That distinction is so important. Calculated risks, not just pure gambling. It also sounds like entrepreneurs aren't just waiting for opportunities to fall in their laps. They're actively creating them.
Absolutely. The entrepreneur is fundamentally an innovator. They're continuously creating and developing new products, new services, based on what they see as society's evolving needs. And beyond just new stuff, they're relentlessly looking for ways to produce things more economically.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The guide gives a few really good ones. Like, say you see a new arcade being built, perfect spot for that hot dog stand you always wanted. Do you just sigh as you pass by?
Right.
Or do you actually talk to the administrator, explore leasing space? Another example. A friend mentions a canteen concession bidding. You're busy, but do you just shrug it off? Or do you make time to go to the bidding conference?
Right. It's about taking action.
Exactly. And what's particularly insightful here, maybe connecting to that visual, the guide uses of someone looking through key-shaped glasses, is how opportunity is framed. It's not just seeing a chance. It's about what you do with it. Are you discouraged by distance, like if there's a rush sale of used welding machines in another province? Or are you proactive, exploring the possibilities? That proactive mindset, that willingness to chase a lead, that defines entrepreneurial action.
Those examples make it crystal clear. It's about that drive, that action. And the guide goes deeper, detailing specific core qualities that mark a successful entrepreneur beyond just seeing opportunities. Let's talk about persistence.
Persistence is absolutely paramount. The guide defines it as the willingness to try and try and try again and learn from failures. Entrepreneurship is rarely a straight path, right? It's full of setbacks. And the ability to pick yourself up, figure out what went wrong, and keep going, that's essential. It's about building resilience with every single challenge.
Okay, persistence. What about commitment to work contract? That sounds pretty basic, like just doing what you promise.
Yeah.
But the guide seems to emphasize it in a, well, almost extreme way.
It does. This quality goes beyond just honoring your word or meeting deadlines, though those are obviously important. It gets into the willingness to do dirty or boring work or someone else's work if necessary, just to get the job done on time.
Wow.
The guide highlights entrepreneurs who pay premium overtime or incentives to meet a delivery schedule, and then they work right alongside their people, maybe even sweeping floors or cleaning toilets. They skip meals, lose sleep, fill in for workers who are out, even miss important family events like graduations or anniversaries, all because of this unwavering commitment to that work contract. It's a profound personal sacrifice for the business's success and its reputation.
That's a level of dedication way beyond a typical 9-to-5 job. It also seems connected to the next quality, demand for quality and efficiency.
Yeah.
Sounds like these entrepreneurs are just never satisfied.
Absolutely. A high standard for quality and efficiency is a dominant trait. They expect excellence from themselves and from their workers. They're constantly striving to find ways to do things better, faster, cheaper. The guide even challenges you directly. Does it bother you when things are not done well? Do you always think there's a better way to accomplish a task?
That's a great question.
It directly confronts that common puwede na yan mentality, the that's good enough attitude. True entrepreneurs just don't settle for good enough.
Oh, good enough for them.
Yeah.
Okay, and there's systematic planning and monitoring. This sounds critical for avoiding those costly mistakes we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
The guide has that visual, right? Someone with a telescope looking at a city, suggesting foresight.
Precisely. A successful entrepreneur doesn't just make a plan, they follow through with that plan systematically. They're constantly checking if activities and the expected results are actually happening as intended. Planning helps avoid costly mistakes, anticipate problems, figure out what you need, materials, skills, money, and lets you schedule things properly in advance.
And the monitoring part.
Monitoring is the verification, checking if everything's on track according to the plan and adjusting if it's not. Think back to Orly Villa, the plant guy. By monitoring the movement of his fertilizers, soil, compost plants, he could plan his next purchases accurately and schedule his replanting for the next batch. This foresight and consistent follow-through are just vital for efficiency and growth. It's about turning that vision into concrete, manageable steps.
That's a really clear link between the big picture and the daily grind. Another quality mentioned is persuasion and networking. That seems essential for any leader, right? You can have the best idea, but if you can't convince people.
Indeed. The entrepreneur is portrayed as a natural leader, someone who can win people over to his way of thinking. And this isn't just about selling a product. It's about persuading partners to invest, convincing a bank to give you a loan, negotiating better credit terms with suppliers, building a network with other entrepreneurs to get useful information.
And selling to customers, obviously.
And of course, persuading buyers to try your new product or service. The guide asks a pointed question. Are you able to get people with opinions of their own to change their minds because they believed what you said? This just highlights the huge power of influence in building a business, cultivating those crucial relationships.
And finally, creativity. It feels like this is where it all begins, doesn't it? That initial spark. The guide even shows that visual of two heads with a light bulb between them.
It absolutely does. Every single business starts as an idea in the entrepreneur's mind. That initial seed then grows through planning and action. But creativity isn't just vital at the start. It's needed continuously throughout the business's life. It's about product innovations. How do you improve or diversify what you offer? It's about marketing innovations. How do you reach more people, find new buyers, maybe introduce your products to totally new markets?
And problem solving.
And perhaps most critically, creativity is used daily for problem solving, tackling the countless challenges that inevitably pop up. This dynamic, adaptive thinking is what keeps a business thriving, allows it to pivot and grow.
Okay, so after hearing about all these incredible qualities, persistence, commitment, quality focus, planning, persuasion, creativity, you might be feeling ready to just leap in. But the guide throws in a pretty sobering reality check about the risk of failure. Sounds like a necessary dose of realism.
It absolutely is. While the potential rewards are attractive, the risks and the demands are equally enormous. They just can't be ignored. The guide states very explicitly that a small business is, by its very nature, prone to risks and the possibility of failure. A single bad decision can potentially lead straight to bankruptcy.
Wow. Is there data on that?
Yes, a study done by the University of the Philippines Institute for Small-Scale Industries back in 1986 revealed that about 1 in 5 new businesses is likely to fail. That's a significant risk, 20%.
1 in 5.
Okay.
So, before you rush headlong into the water, as the guide vividly puts it, or maybe quit your current job, it's crucial to think, well, multiple times. The guide advises being a wiser entrepreneur, someone who brings out a thermometer first to check the water temperature. It's about taking those calculated risks we talked about, being prepared, understanding the terrain before you plunge in.
That analogy perfectly captures the mindset. It's not about avoiding risk altogether, you can't in business, but about mitigating it through solid preparation and informed decision-making. Understanding the qualities of a successful entrepreneur is only half the battle. The other half is knowing how to apply those strengths to minimize the inherent risks.
That's a perfect segue. The guide makes it clear the entrepreneur is key. But even the most driven person needs a starting point, an idea. So once you've got that entrepreneurial fire lit, where do you even begin to find that spark, that thing that could actually turn into a business? Let's explore the surprising places business ideas really come from, and then look at the options you have for actually getting started.
The guide offers several excellent starting points. First, and maybe most obviously, it strongly emphasizes leveraging what you already know, your existing knowledge. It's a proven fact that many successful small business ideas come directly from someone's previous job experience.
Like what?
For instance, carpenters often transition pretty confidently into construction or maybe furniture making. Seamstresses have a strong chance of succeeding in garment making or opening a tailoring shop. Cooks are naturally well-suited to start a curanderia, a local eatery, or a small restaurant.
That makes a lot of sense. You already have skills and probably a network.
Exactly. The key insight here is you're building on an existing skill set. That provides a solid, practical foundation and often, a built-in network.
Okay, so tap into your own experience. Beyond that, how else can you spot a promising business idea?
Another fundamental principle is identifying market needs. At the end of the day, all enterprising ventures, one way or another, answer some kind of human need. So a great starting point is to just study your own community, your village, your barangay. Ask yourself, is it self-sufficient? Or do people have to go out of their way to buy basic things like pan de sal, that popular Filipino bread, or cooked food, or cooking oil?
Well, looking for gaps.
Exactly. Do they need services like shoe repair, car washing, maybe pest control? Unmet needs right there in your immediate environment are prime business opportunities just waiting to be filled. It's about seeing problems as potential businesses.
That's a very practical, on-the-ground approach. What about things that are already in the community? Existing products or resources? Can they spark ideas?
Absolutely. You can often add significant value to local products. The guide uses the example of, say, rattan poles grown in a community. These are often just sold raw or semi-finished to furniture makers somewhere else. A potential entrepreneur could look for ways to increase the value of those poles before they leave the community. Maybe pre-cutting them to specific sizes, treating them with chemicals to make them last longer, even varnishing or painting them. The best way, of course, would be to actually manufacture rattan furniture or handicraft items like trays or boxes right there in the community. You can earn much more that way, keeping more value locally. The insight is about recognizing the hidden potential in raw materials right under your nose.
That's smart, moving up the value chain. And it makes me think of communities known for specific crafts. Can those traditional skills be a basis for a modern business?
Definitely. The guide highlights tapping into traditional skills. There are loads of examples of communities that have built progressive, successful enterprises on these inherited capabilities. Think of shoemaking in Marikina City, slipper making in Lili, Laguna, woodcraft in Paete, Laguna, or jewelry making in Makayan, Bulacan. These are all places where traditional skills have been harnessed and scaled into thriving industries, blending heritage with modern business practices.
So it's about looking inwards at the skills the community already has. What about looking outwards at what's working somewhere else?
That's where adapting and innovating come in. You should definitely look at successful projects in, say, comparable communities or maybe urban areas and see how you could adapt them to your own situation. For example, internet cafes first blew up in Metro Manila, but then they started popping up all over the provinces. Similarly, fads like, remember those string-it-yourself bracelets? Or color-it-yourself ceramics? Those could be adapted from city trends to provincial markets.
So copycatting.
Well, the key insight here, and the guide stresses this, is that it's not just about copying and imitating. The real emphasis is on innovation, improving someone else's idea to make it work better for your local situation, reshaping products or services to fit new trends, maybe adding features to increase the benefits. It's intelligent evolution, not just imitation.
Intelligent evolution, I like that. And finally, how do bigger trends like industry changes or new technologies play a role in finding ideas?
Oh, they open up entirely new avenues. You should explore what the guide calls forward-backward industry linkages within your community, what businesses already exist, and what upstream supply needs or downstream processing needs do they have. Additionally, always stay alert to technological advancements. For instance, R&D in aquaculture made prawn and bangus, milkfish, farming viable businesses. Waste utilization research led to new products like wood particle boards.
And technology today is moving so fast.
Exactly. E-commerce has fundamentally changed how business is done, creating entirely new web-based ventures and massively improving existing ones. Technology can be a powerful catalyst for new enterprise, constantly opening new doors if you're paying attention.
Okay, so many ways to find that initial spark. Once you have an idea, though, what are your actual options for starting the business? Is it always about building something brand new from the ground up, or are there other paths?
Not necessarily. Well, the traditional route is definitely starting brand new from scratch. The guide presents two other really compelling options that might actually be a better fit for some entrepreneurs.
Okay, so you don't have to be a creative genius with a totally unique concept.
Yeah.
What's the second option if you've got the drive, but maybe not that brand new idea spark?
The second option is buying an existing business. This can be very attractive for people who might lack a new, groundbreaking idea, or maybe they just want to skip some of those initial, often complex, startup processes like building a customer base from absolute zero.
Sounds tempting. What's the catch?
Well, it comes with its own set of factors you have to carefully consider. How volatile are the company's cash flows? How fierce is the competition in that industry? Is the industry itself growing or shrinking? How well established is the company? Is there a competent management team and work crew already in place? And historically, has the company been growing or shrinking, and how fast?
Wow, lots to investigate.
Absolutely. The key insight here is that while you might get a head start, due diligence is absolutely critical. You really need to seek professional advice from an accountant, maybe a lawyer, probably both, to make sure you're protected and you fully understand exactly what you're buying into.
That's solid advice. Okay, what's the third option? And is it really as straightforward as it sometimes sounds?
The third option is taking a franchise. This has famously been called the business with the least fears and tears.
Really? Why?
Well, a franchise establishes a legal and commercial relationship where the franchise, that's you, the small business, gets to use the trademark, the service mark, the brand name, maybe the advertising symbols owned by the franchisor. Generally, you'd sell goods or services supplied by the franchisor or that meet their very strict quality standards.
It sounds almost too good to be true, doesn't it? An established brand, a proven system already worked out. But what's the catch? What are the real advantages versus, say, the downsides?
Well, while it's true the success rate for franchise-owned businesses is significantly higher than for independent startups, it's crucial to understand it's not a guarantee of success. You still have to weigh the pros and cons very carefully. The key advantages are definitely the established brand and the existing customer base. You benefit from the franchisor's reputation and customer loyalty right from day one. You also often get training, ongoing support, and proven marketing strategies handed to you.
But the downside?
The downside is usually less independence. You have to adhere strictly to the franchisor's rules and operational manuals. The insight is that you're essentially trading some autonomy for a higher probability of success, but ultimately it's still your effort that makes it work or fail.
So whether you're starting fresh, buying an existing business, or taking on a franchise, one thing seems universally true. You absolutely need a plan. Which brings us squarely to the business plan, your roadmap to success. This feels like the absolute bedrock of any successful venture.
It absolutely is. The guide really emphasizes that preparing a business plan is like doing your homework before you embark on a major project. It's the indispensable guiding document for setting up your business. Its purpose is multifaceted. It helps prevent costly mistakes down the line. It allows you to anticipate potential problems before they happen. It helps you determine all your needs, materials, skills, finance, and it enables you to program your activities properly in advance.
So if the entrepreneur is the heartbeat, the business plan is kind of the brain, right? It's what keeps you from just rushing headlong into the water without checking the temperature first. It serves as your roadmap to an unfamiliar territory, minimizing those unpleasant surprises. And, crucially, it lets you assess your actual performance against the goals you set once you're up and running.
What's particularly insightful here, and this connects to that visual, the guide uses of a notebook and pen, is how the business plan transforms your abstract ideas into concrete figures. It translates your marketing vision, your production process, everything, into monetary terms. It allows you to really assess if your expected profit truly outweighs your costs of setting up and operating the business. It's not just a theoretical exercise, it's a vital tool for understanding financial viability and making informed decisions from the get-go.
So what are the core components of this crucial document? What are the main chapters, so to speak, that you need to fill in?
The guide breaks down the business plan into four major components. You've got the marketing plan, the production or technical plan, the organizational plan, and finally, the financial plan. Each one is a detailed look at a different facet of the business, but they all need to work together to create a cohesive, actionable whole.
Okay, let's dig into the production or technical plan first. What does that actually involve? It sounds like it's all about the how-to of your business.
Precisely. The production process section is essentially your step-by-step recipe. How is your product actually made, or how is your service completed? For instance, in the soap making example used in the guide, you would detail every single step, combining the ingredients, mixing them, pouring into molds, the whole curing process, much like following a cookbook recipe. This helps you visualize and streamline your operations, ensuring consistency.
Makes sense. And what about the physical stuff you need, the tools, the materials?
That falls under equipment and materials. Here, you identify all the necessary machines and equipment, like for soap making, maybe a stick blender, a weighing scale, perhaps computer and printer for labels, or for a laundry shop, washing machines, dryers. You also differentiate between direct materials, things that actually become part of the final product, like the base oil, caustic solution, and papaya extract for the soap, and indirect materials, which are used in smaller amounts, like maybe the scent added to the soap. This ensures you know exactly what inputs you need to produce your goods or deliver your service.
And how does all this detail inform your day-to-day operations, or even your bigger commitment to the business? Like, can you do this part-time?
That's where the production schedule comes in. This details how long each step in your production cycle actually takes. For the soap example, the curing period is quite long, right? So you'd likely prepare the mixture for many barg all at once. Once you calculate the time required for one full production cycle, you can figure out how many cycles you can realistically complete in a week, a month, or a year. This information is absolutely crucial for deciding whether the business can be a full-time venture right away, or if it needs to start as or remain a part-time project that fits around other commitments. It dictates the operational rhythm.
Okay, moving from the how-to of production to the numbers that really dictate a business's health. Let's talk about the financial plan. This truly is the blood of the business, as the guide puts it, the ultimate translation of all your ideas into cold, hard cash terms.
It is indeed. The financial plan is where all those other plans, your marketing ideas, your production process, your organizational structure all get translated into monetary terms. This is really where you see if your expected profits are actually greater than the costs of setting up and operating the business. It's the moment of truth, financially speaking.
What exactly goes into calculating the total project cost? It sounds like it's more than just the initial money you need to start.
It's a comprehensive calculation, yeah. It includes several key categories. First, there are your fixed assets. These are the long-term investments like land, buildings, vehicles, machinery, equipment like the blender, scale, computer for our soap business example. Second is working capital. These are the funds you need for your short-term, day-to-day expenses related to production, marketing, organization. It basically bridges the gap until your revenue starts flowing in consistently. And finally, there are pre-operating expenses. These include initial costs like business registration fees, maybe consultancy fees if you paid for a feasibility study. Your source of the funds are also detailed here: personal savings, other owners, family, friends, or formal financial institutions.
And once you're actually up and running, how do you track your financial health? The guide mentions specific financial statements. For someone who isn't an accountant, what are the key ones to really understand?
Right. The financial plan usually includes projections of key financial statements. The first is the income statement. This shows your profit or loss over a specific period, say a month or a year, by subtracting all your expenses from your revenues. For example, if your soap business expects $24,000 in monthly sales, the income statement shows if that actually results in a profit after all costs are deducted. The second is the balance sheet. This is like a financial snapshot of your business at a specific moment in time. It details what you own, assets, what you owe, liabilities, and your net worth equity. And the third is the cash flow statement. This tracks the actual sources and uses of cash over a period, showing exactly where money came from and where it went.
Do you need to be an accountant to use these?
Not necessarily to prepare them meticulously, maybe a bookkeeper or accountant does that, but the crucial insight the guide stresses is that you, the entrepreneur, must understand them. They are like your business's health checkup. They let you quickly diagnose problems or confirm things are going well so you can make informed decisions based on real data.
Okay, so with the business plan as our solid roadmap, let's talk about the destination, reaching your market. This brings us into the nitty-gritty of marketing and optimizing your operations. The guide really hammers home the idea that the customer is king.
Indeed. Marketing, in this context, is all about the commercial processes involved in promoting, selling, and distributing your product or service. It's about those functions that actually transfer goods from you, the producer, to the consumer. And central to all of this is truly understanding your target market.
And how do you get that understanding? It sounds like you need to become an expert on your potential customers, but maybe without spending a fortune on research.
You do. The guide emphasizes the skill of grouping people into different market segments, then analyzing which of those segments you should actually target with your product or service. The absolute key is gathering deep insights into those chosen segments. And the good news is you don't necessarily need a huge budget for this. The guide outlines some incredibly practical, really low-cost market research tools you can use.
This is where the guide gets really creative with its advice, I thought. Who knew body storming could be a market research tool?
Yeah.
It seems like it's all about empathy, right? Really trying to step into your customer's shoes.
It absolutely is about empathy and gaining that firsthand understanding without breaking the bank. For instance, body storming. It's fascinating, maybe less common. It's a variation of brainstorming, but you use your body physically to demonstrate ideas and experience possibilities.
How does that work?
Like, if you're designing a new type of tricycle, you'd physically sit in a mock-up, step in and out, maybe simulate the ride, to gather insights into the actual riding experience. It's about acting out scenarios and focusing on spontaneous physical responses. Then there's prototyping, which is just crucial. Quickly creating samples or maybe lookalikes of your product. Think of popular taste tests or sampling for food products to get direct, immediate feedback from your target market. These aren't just academic exercises. They give you real, raw insights quickly and cheaply.
That's incredibly hands-on. Okay, so once you have these insights, how do you actually quantify your potential? How do you estimate how many people might really buy your product?
That's the skill of estimating potential market demand. It's essentially an educated guess, yes, but a really crucial one. It directly impacts your sales forecasts and therefore your capital needs, your manpower requirements, everything. A simple way to get a rough idea is using national census data. For example, if the census shows there are 10 million women in the country, and you maybe assume each might buy, say, 2 blouses a year on average, then your potential market demand for blouses would be around 20 million per year. This kind of numerical representation helps you understand the scale of the opportunity and guides your production planning.
Okay, so you know your market, you have an idea of how many potential customers there are. Now, how do you actually persuade them to buy your product or service? What are the key marketing strategies the guide highlights for influencing that crucial decision?
The guide focuses on several tried and tested approaches. First off, branding. A short, catchy brand name is really essential because it helps people remember you and easily identify your product or service, distinguishing it from competitors. Think of names like McDonald for chicken, Raya's Haircutters for a salon, or Mr. Quickie for shoe repair. They immediately tell you what the business is about, and they're easy to recall.
It's all about creating that instant connection and recognition, making it stick in people's minds. What else influences those buying decisions?
Product features and quality are absolutely critical. You can actually change features to specifically target different markets. Remember early Nokia mobile phones? They started with basic calls, but then they introduced models with game consoles for gamers and then camera phones for people interested in photography.
Right, evolving the product.
Exactly. The level of quality also matters immensely. Very high-quality products typically target higher income brackets. The core idea is to match your product's attributes precisely to what your target customer actually needs and desires.
And then there's promotions. How do you actually get the word out? Make sure people even know you exist and what you offer.
Promotions is the collective term for all the communication tools and media a business uses to get its message across to the target market. This covers everything from traditional TV, radio, and newspaper ads to, internet ads or viral marketing today. The most important thing about your message, though, is that it must always convey the specific benefits your target market can expect to get from using your product or service. Your promotion should directly address a need or want that you uncovered during your market study.
So it's not just about shouting, it's about connecting.
Precisely. The objectives of advertising can vary. Maybe building awareness, persuading people to switch, reinforcing their choice, or simply reminding them you're there. And sales promotions involve tangible incentives like free samples or discount coupons to encourage trial or purchase.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about what to sell and who to sell it to. Now let's shift gears into the real nuts and bolts of actually making your product or completing your service. This is the operational side, the production decisions. Where do you even start with that?
It often starts with one of the most fundamental decisions you'll make: choosing your place of business, your location. The best location is one that allows your enterprise to produce and sell to its customers at the lowest possible cost overall. This usually means locating near your target market to minimize delivery and transportation expenses, which might let you offer lower prices. It also means being near your sources of materials, labor, power, water, all the things that contribute to keeping your production costs down. It's all about strategic placement for efficiency.
Okay, once you have the location sorted, how do you actually arrange the space inside? What's important about the layout?
The guide distinguishes between two main types of layouts. There's a process layout, which is designed for businesses producing diverse products or services. Here, machines and equipment are grouped by function. Think of an auto repair shop where different bays handle engine work, body work, painting, etc. Then there's a product layout. This is more for mass production, where machines are arranged in a sequential assembly line for maybe just one or a few very similar products, like in a bottling plant. The choice depends entirely on the nature of your specific business and what you're trying to optimize: flexibility or sheer volume.
And for businesses that have a storefront, like a retail shop, is there a specific art to designing the display window? It seems like it's more than just randomly putting things out there.
Oh, there absolutely is. For retail, that display window is a critical marketing tool. It really needs to reflect the tastes and attitudes of your specific target market. You should change displays frequently to keep things fresh, maybe use themes that coordinate with holidays or special local events. Crucially, ensure you have sufficient stock of the items you're featuring on display. Nothing worse than seeing something great and finding it sold out. Prepare all your materials, merchandise, stands, signs ahead of time, and always use attractive and harmonious color combinations. It's really about inviting customers in visually, making an immediate impact that entices them to step inside and buy.
Beyond the visual appeal, what about the actual machines and equipment you need to do the work? What factors should entrepreneurs consider beyond just does it turn on and work?
Your choice of machines and equipment directly impacts your overall profitability. It affects your costs, your productivity, your product quality, and ultimately your revenues. So it's a big decision. You need to carefully consider the operating characteristics of the machine, what's its intended function, how does it fit into your overall process. Also, thoroughly evaluate the support you'll get from the supplier, things like installation help, warranty coverage, and ongoing maintenance service.
Does it always have to be brand new?
Not necessarily, and here's a key insight from the guide. You don't always have to buy brand new. Other options include purchasing secondhand equipment, which can save a lot of capital. You could also consider leasing equipment or even subcontracting certain parts of your production process to another business to avoid buying expensive machinery altogether, especially at the start. Each option has pros and cons that need careful study based on cost effectiveness and how you plan to scale.
Managing all the physical goods, raw materials, finished products sounds like a constant juggling act. What's the secret to effective inventory control? How do you avoid having way too much stuff sitting around, or worse, running out?
Inventory control is absolutely crucial, mainly for managing your working capital effectively. The goal is basically to operate efficiently with the least amount of stock necessary. You want to avoid having too much inventory because that ties up your precious capital and goods can deteriorate, like fabrics getting stained or flour getting lumpy. But you also desperately want to avoid having too little, which can halt your production entirely or lead to lost sales if a customer wants something and you've run out.
So how do you find that sweet spot?
Tips include really knowing which goods sell fast and which sell slow, regularly checking your stock levels, physical counts, and arranging everything properly so it's easy to count and access.
And how do you figure out how much to keep on hand?
Well, you need to distinguish between your basic stock goods, things used or sold regularly at a fairly constant rate, and seasonal goods, where demand fluctuates wildly. To control inventory effectively, you need to know when to order, how often to order, and how much to order each time. The guide provides a useful concept here: the reorder level, and incorporating a safety stock. For instance, if it takes you, say, 2 weeks to get new stock delivered, and you typically sell 50 units per week, Your basic reorder level is 100 units, 2 weeks by 50 units a week.
Okay, so order when you hit 100.
Maybe a bit higher, just to be safe. You'd add a safety stock, perhaps half the reserve stock, so another 50 units, in this case, bringing your actual reorder point to 150 units. It's about having just enough buffer to meet demand reliably without tying up excessive cash in stock just sitting there.
That makes sense. And once you're actually producing, how do you ensure consistency and quality? It's one thing to make something once, but another challenge entirely to make it well every single time.
That falls under the umbrella of production planning and control. This involves translating your sales forecasts into detailed production plans, figuring out the necessary resources, manpower, and schedules, often looking ahead maybe 12 months. Quality control within this is paramount. You absolutely must regularly inspect for quality at various stages, conduct adequate tests, maintain your machines properly, check the quality of incoming raw materials, provide really clear instructions and training to your workers, maybe offer incentives for quality work, and, importantly, hold workers accountable for defects. The goal is to detect any bad processes or substandard output immediately and ensure your product or service consistently meets or exceeds customer specifications and expectations. It's about building quality into every single step of the process, not just inspecting at the end.
We've covered a huge amount about the business itself, from the initial idea to the market to the operations. But a business isn't just about products and numbers, is it? It's also crucially about people and the legal structure you operate within. That seems like a really big step, moving from just a concept to a legitimate, formal entity.
That's absolutely right. This is where the theoretical business concept starts to take on a formal legal identity in the real world. And understanding the legal forms available to you is absolutely fundamental before you take that step.
It really feels like moving from the what-if stage to the how do we actually make this legal stage? And it's a big one. What are the main legal forms that a small business typically takes?
The guide outlines 3 primary forms. The simplest is usually a single proprietorship. Here, the owner and the business are legally considered one and the same entity. It's generally the easiest and cheapest to set up, but the major drawback is that the owner has unlimited personal liability for business debts. Meaning your personal assets, your house, your car, your savings could potentially be at risk if the business runs into significant debt. There's no legal separation.
Okay, that's a big consideration. What if there's more than one owner involved?
Then you might look at forming a partnership. This involves 2 or more owners who agree to share in the profits and losses of the business. While it allows for shared responsibility and potentially more capital, it also typically comes with unlimited liability for all the partners. Their personal assets could still be at risk if the business incurs major debts.
Right. And the most complex option, usually associated with bigger businesses, is the corporation.
Yes, a corporation is often described as an artificial being created by operation of law. This means it has a separate legal personality, completely distinct from its owners, the shareholders. Like a person, it can sue and be sued, own property in its own name, and enter into contracts.
What are the advantages there?
The major benefits are limited liability for the owners. Their personal assets are generally protected from business debts. And it's usually easier to raise capital, perhaps because it gives the impression of being a larger, more stable company.
But there must be downsides.
Oh, yes. It typically involves more expenses to set up and maintain. Decision-making can be slower due to the need for board approvals, and corporations often face what's called double taxation. The company pays taxes on its profits, and then the shareholders pay taxes again on the dividends they receive. Plus, there's generally more regulation and paperwork involved.
And the guide also mentions something called a cooperative, which sounds like a unique kind of structure, maybe more community-focused.
A cooperative is described in the guide as a kind of localized version of a corporation. It also possesses a separate legal personality from its members. In the Philippines, they register with the Cooperative Development Authority, CDA. Benefits can include easier capital mobilization among members, facilitation of knowledge and technology transfer since members often share common interests, and sometimes tax-exempt status or other privileges. However, like corporations, major decisions usually require board approval, and their scope of operation is often legally limited to the geographical area where its members reside or work.
Okay, so once you've picked your legal structure, sole proprietorship, partnership, corporation, or cooperative, you still have to make it official, right? Why is business registration so important? Is it just about ticking boxes for the government?
Well, Beyond simply being legal because, as the guide notes, an unregistered enterprise isn't even counted within the economic mainstream registration, offers very real, tangible benefits. The guide uses these little examples, like an illegal taxi driver constantly hiding his signboard, or a small eatery carinderia owner complaining about freeloading people in uniform demanding free meals. These illustrate the constant fear and hassle of operating underground, always worried about unwanted guests and needing to come across or pay bribes to avoid issues.
So legitimacy brings peace of mind.
Exactly. And more than that, registering allows you the exclusive legal right to use your chosen business name, your designs, your brand. More importantly, the guide calls it an investment and a passport to opportunities. Registration often provides access to various government and private support programs, like the BMBE law in the Philippines, which offers specific benefits designed to help micro, small, and medium enterprises. The key insight is that becoming legitimate unlocks a whole host of protections and growth opportunities.
So it's really about gaining legitimacy and unlocking potential support. But where do you even begin with all the paperwork? It sounds potentially overwhelming. What are the key agencies you typically need to deal with, at least in the Philippine context the guide focuses on?
Right. In the Philippines, you typically deal with a few key government agencies, depending on your chosen business type. For single proprietorships, you start by registering your business name with the Department of Trade and Industry, DTI. Partnerships and corporations need to register with the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Cooperatives go to the Cooperative Development Authority, CDA. Then, regardless of the form, all businesses need to get a business permit from the mayor's office in the city or municipality where they operate. For taxes, you register with the Bureau of Internal Revenue, BIR, and if you have employees, you'll need to register them and yourself as the employer with the Social Security System, SSS, PhilHealth for health insurance, and PAG-IBIG for housing fund contributions.
Wow, that's quite a list. Anything else?
Yes. Depending on your specific industry, you might also need special permits from other agencies. For example, schools need permits from the Department of Education, DepEd, security agencies from the Philippine National Police, PNP, and so on. The guiding principle here is that every legitimate business needs to navigate these layers of government regulation to achieve full compliance and operate openly.
That is definitely a comprehensive list.
All right.
Any final practical tips or reminders for when you're actually navigating this registration maze? Sounds like it could be pretty frustrating.
It certainly can be. The guide offers some sound advice. First, be absolutely clear on the requirements, ask questions immediately if anything isn't clear to you. Second, try to schedule your appointments efficiently, especially if different agency offices are located close to each other, to save time and travel. And crucially, maybe a couple of days before you plan to file everything, review your complete list of requirements one last time. Double-check all your filled-out forms meticulously for any incorrect entries or overlooked details. Maybe even ask a family member or friend to help cross-check. This carefulness can prevent really frustrating delays and having to redo paperwork.
Good advice. Okay, so with the legal framework hopefully in place, let's talk about the people who will actually make the business run day to day. Staffing. As the owner-manager, especially at the start, how do you approach hiring? You might be doing almost everything yourself initially.
The guide strongly advises starting with a really objective self-assessment. You, as the potential owner-manager, need to honestly ask yourself, am I truly able and willing to handle all the core management functions, marketing, production, finance, and administration, without completely sacrificing my personal life or other essential roles I have as a spouse, parent, or community member? It encourages reviewing those personal entrepreneurial competencies we talked about earlier. If you can genuinely be a jack of all trades, balance everything effectively, and enjoy it, then maybe you can go it alone initially. But for most people, realistically, you'll likely need help sooner rather than later.
So, assuming you do need help, how do you go from just a long list of tasks that need doing to figuring out actual job roles and deciding how many people you actually need?
The first step is to break down all the business activities into those four main functional areas: marketing, production, finance, and administration. Under marketing, you'd list tasks like sales calls, delivery, handling promotions, maybe after-service support. Production would include manufacturing steps, machine operation, quality control checks, inventory management. Finance covers bookkeeping, payroll, managing payables and receivables, handling petty cash. And administration includes general office duties, ensuring legal compliance, maybe some basic human resources tasks. Once you have this comprehensive list, you exclude the tasks you realistically plan to handle yourself. The remaining tasks are then grouped together logically and translated into job designations or position titles.
Does one person do just one job?
Not necessarily in a small business. One person might easily wear multiple hats. For example, your bookkeeper might also handle administrative assistant duties. The key, the guide emphasizes, is determining the sufficient number of people needed so that no one is consistently overworked, ensuring efficiency without incurring unnecessary salary costs.
And speaking of salaries, worker compensation is always a huge topic. How do you figure out what to pay people in a small business context? Do you just stick to the minimum wage?
Well, you absolutely must adhere to the prevailing minimum wage laws in your region. That's the baseline. However, if your business happens to be registered under the BMBE law in the Philippines, Barangay Micro Business Enterprise, the guideline is also to consider what is just and equitable for your employees, which might offer some flexibility but still implies fairness. Beyond the legal minimum, the guide presents several strategies entrepreneurs use. Some aim to match the standard salaries paid by similar businesses in the industry. Others deliberately pay slightly higher, maybe 10% more, believing this directly boosts productivity, loyalty, and reduces turnover. Another approach is to start new recruits at a slightly lower rate that can be adjusted upward after a probationary period, based on proven performance. The key is finding that balance between legal compliance, being competitive enough to attract and retain good people, and maintaining your overall profitability.
And finally, a very practical but often really tricky question for small businesses. What about hiring friends or relatives? It seems like it could simplify things sometimes, or maybe complicate them enormously.
It absolutely can do both. The crucial reminder the guide offers here is to be absolutely crystal clear from the very beginning about requiring professionalism in the workplace. While hiring people close to you might seem convenient and maybe builds on existing trust, it's absolutely vital that those personal relationships don't compromise professional standards, accountability, or the efficient operation of the business. Clear boundaries, clear expectations, and consistent application of rules are a must-right from day one, regardless of who the employee is.
That is very wise, potentially relationship-saving advice. Okay, now let's move on to the absolute practical heartbeat of any business: managing your money. It's clearly about more than just having cash in the bank. It's about understanding every single cent coming in and going out.
Exactly. Knowing your costs is just fundamentally crucial. It forms the absolute foundation of your profitability. It directly impacts how you set your prices, how you manage your profit margins, and ultimately it allows you to make informed decisions about pretty much every aspect of your operation. Without understanding your costs accurately, you're essentially flying blind, financially speaking.
So what are the main types of costs that a typical small business needs to track and understand?
The guide breaks them down into three main categories for manufacturers: direct material costs, direct labor costs, and manufacturing overhead. Direct material costs are what you spend on materials that physically become part of your final product, or are directly consumed in providing your service, like the caustic solution, papaya extract, and base oil for making soap, or maybe the laundry detergent and water used in a laundry shop. Direct labor costs are the wages paid specifically to the workers who are directly involved in the production process. And manufacturing overhead covers all the other indirect costs associated with production, things like factory rent, utilities for the production area, depreciation of manufacturing equipment. For manufacturers, these three together are often referred to as your total manufacturing costs.
To really make this concrete and relatable, the guide uses that great example of a chicheria cart, a snack cart. It really forces you to think about every little expense, doesn't it? Even the ones you might not immediately consider, like wear and tear.
It does, and it's an excellent illustration of how seemingly small expenses add up significantly and how you absolutely need to account for those hidden costs like depreciation. Think of depreciation on your chicheria cart, like the wear and tear on your favorite pair of shoes. You buy them new, but over time, with use, they lose value. That loss of value is a real cost of using them, even if you don't physically hand over cash for it every single day.
Right. It's a non-cash expense, but still a cost.
Exactly. The guide highlights this. If you had that cart custom made for, say, P10,000, and you estimate it has a useful lifespan of 2 years, maybe 20 school months, that works out to P500 a month in depreciation cost, or P125 a week. That's a real cost of doing business that needs to be factored into your pricing and profit calculations. Plus, you have maybe the monthly rent for your stall space, puesto, the cost of transportation twice a week to buy your stock. These are all real costs that must be accurately accounted for to ensure you're actually making a profit. The key insight is to recognize and track all your expenses, even the less obvious ones, to truly understand your financial health.
Okay, so once you're aware of all these different costs, how do you actually track them effectively, especially if you're not naturally an accountant? The guide really emphasizes the importance of basic record keeping.
Accurate record keeping is absolutely essential. It's the only way to know if your business is truly healthy, sick, or just okay, as the guide puts it. You simply can't rely on just keeping things in your head or jotting notes in a simple notebook, although notebooks can be useful for temporary, on-the-spot notes. The guide insists on using a proper journal for recording transactions chronologically, using the basic principles of debit and credit entries. These journal entries are then periodically summarized and posted to a general ledger, which groups transactions by account type.
Does the record-keeping system need to become more complex as the business grows? It sounds like eventually you might need more than just one big journal or ledger.
That's right. As your business grows and the volume of transactions increases, your record-keeping system typically needs to get a bit more sophisticated to remain efficient. Think of it like this. Instead of one single journal trying to capture everything, you might start using separate, specialized journals, sometimes called trackers, for different types of frequent transactions. For example, you might have a sales journal just for recording all your credit sales, a cash receipts journal for all the cash coming in, a cash disbursements journal for all the cash going out, a purchases journal for buying goods on credit, and then a general journal for infrequent or adjusting entries that don't fit elsewhere. The goal isn't necessarily to become an accountant overnight, but to gain clearer, more organized insights into specific financial areas as your business scales. This precision helps you make much better, more timely decisions.
And ultimately, all these detailed records feed back into those crucial financial statements we discussed earlier as part of the business plan, don't they? The income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement.
They absolutely do. The income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement are the key summary reports derived directly from your detailed accounting records. And again, while you, the entrepreneur, don't necessarily need to be an expert in preparing these statements meticulously yourself, perhaps you hire a bookkeeper or accountant that the plan strongly highlights the critical importance of using them. They are your diagnostic tools. The real value lies in analyzing the data they provide, not just in the act of creating them, so you can truly understand your business's performance, identify trends, spot problems early, and make strategic adjustments based on facts, not just feelings.
Finally, let's talk about managing the actual flow of money, the cash itself. It's clearly not enough to just have cash sometimes. It's about how you manage it, protect it, and make it work for you.
No, it's all about smart cash management. The guide first recaps common sources of funds for small businesses. Your own personal savings are often number one. Then loans from family and friends. It even touches upon informal loan schemes common in some areas, like the 5-6 loans often provided by, say, motorbike riding Indian nationals in the Philippines, known for their easy accessibility and often trust-based relationships without requiring formal collateral. And of course, formal government loan programs and private financial institutions are also sources. The key insight, perhaps connected to that visual of money stacks in a piggy bank, is simply that cash is the absolute lifeblood of any business. You need to know precisely where it's coming from and, just as importantly, where it's going.
And what are some of the common poor cash management practices that entrepreneurs should definitely try to avoid? Things that can really get a small business into trouble.
A critical one the guide points out is a simple lack of cash planning. Entrepreneurs can become so absorbed in the urgent demands of daily operations that they just forget to properly plan and forecast their cash needs, leading to unexpected shortages or maybe impulsive overspending when cash seems plentiful. They also often fail to anticipate the impact of busy seasons versus lean seasons on their cash flow, which can leave them dangerously cash-strapped during slow periods or with unproductive excess cash sitting idle during peak times. Another poor practice mentioned is making prepayments unnecessarily paying bills long before they're due, which just ties up cash that could be used more productively elsewhere, limiting your flexibility.
Okay, so those are the pitfalls. What about the flip side? What are the smart cash management practices that the guide recommends adopting?
First and foremost, reconcile your bank accounts monthly. Preparing a bank reconciliation statement is vital for monitoring the actual flow of funds in and out of your bank account and quickly catching any discrepancies, errors, or unauthorized transactions. Second, you need to effectively manage your receivables, that's the money owed to you by your customers. This requires establishing and consistently applying a sound credit policy. The guide suggests basing this on what it calls the 5 C's of credit. Think of them as your checklist before extending credit to a customer.
What are the 5 C's?
They are: character. Does the customer have integrity and a history of paying debts? Capacity. Do they have the financial ability to actually pay? Collateral. Do they have any assets they could pledge to secure the debt? Capital. What's their overall financial strength or net worth? And capability. Can their business operations effectively generate the cash needed to pay you back? Based on this assessment, you should define clear credit terms, like maybe a maximum amount of credit per customer and specific payment terms. For example, payment due within 30, 60, or 90 days. And importantly, require down payments whenever feasible to reduce your risk and improve your cash flow upfront.
That makes sense for money coming in. What about managing your own payables, the money you owe to your suppliers?
Smart management of payables involves strategically postponing the payment of non-interest-bearing obligations whenever possible, right up until the due date. This allows you to keep your cash working for you longer, perhaps funding income-generating activities. The guide also encourages consolidating your payments, maybe making disbursements only once a week, which makes monitoring and controlling your cash outflow much easier. And here's a clever trick mentioned, especially common in close-knit business communities. Consider using X-deal or barter, sometimes called trade-in, to settle obligations without actually spending cash. You might even do this between competitors sometimes. It's all about conserving your precious cash for the most essential operations.
Wow. This deep dive has truly unpacked so many layers involved in starting and running a small business. We've really covered a lot of ground today. Everything from defining what a small business actually is, looking at its unique strengths and weaknesses, understanding the absolutely indispensable role of the entrepreneur and their key qualities, to figuring out where to find that initial business idea, how to build a robust business plan as your roadmap, how to effectively reach your market and optimize your operations, navigating the often complex legal maze of registration, staffing your team thoughtfully, and ultimately managing your costs and cash flow effectively. It's a huge amount to consider.
Indeed it is, and it really underscores that the journey of an entrepreneur isn't just a single plunge into the water. It's more like a continuous series of calculated dips, always testing the conditions, always learning, always adapting. The information in this guide provides a really solid foundation, absolutely, but the true deep learning really happens in the doing, in facing the day-to-day realities.
That's a powerful thought to perhaps leave everyone with. This guide, while incredibly comprehensive and practical, is ultimately meant to, as it says, induce action. The real value comes not just from listening today, but from applying the knowledge you've gained. So you've seen how a detailed business plan acts as your essential compass and map as you start out. But remember, the terrain of entrepreneurship, the market, technology, customer needs, it's always shifting, always changing. So the final provocative thought we want to leave you with is this. What ongoing market research, what continuous learning and adaptation will you commit to, not just at the very start, but throughout the entire life of your potential enterprise, to ensure you're always checking the water temperature, always adapting, and always innovating? What stands out most to you from today's exploration?